Good day, my beautiful children. This lesson is set for Tuesday. I, I'm not even going to try and figure out what the date is. Somewhere between March the 29th and July 5th. I don't know. I don't know anymore. Does anybody? Um, anyway, we're continuing on with our radio, and this will be one of the last things we talk about. Um, So, as we talked about with the golden age of radio, radio was king for people. It was where they went to every day for not only their information, but also for their entertainment. And even back then, when with that being all that they had, some of it wasn't incredibly uh, exciting, but there were some events that kind of solidified radio as must hear entertainment. You got to be there. And I want to talk about two of those things today. So in television, we've had there's like a Mount Rushmore of TV events over the decades that have made TV can't miss. uh, Not all of them good, but you think of things like the Beatles appearance on Ed Sullivan, um, the death of President Kennedy, the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald on national television, the space shuttle Challenger explosion. These are all events that the entire country was watching on TV, and made it so, oh God, I got to turn into television. You can't miss anything. Well, there are two events for radio that did this. And the first one I want to talk about is the Hindenburg disaster. So let me set the stage here. Um, in in the 1930s, um, airplane travel was just becoming a thing. Like the airplane had been invented a decade before, but the planes at that time were basically balsa wood kites, and couldn't really carry more than one or two people. And what people went to for airline travel to like actually travel long distances by air was blimps. And these were hydrogen filled balloons, basically, that were large enough to carry passengers. And this wasn't like a huge thing, but it was big enough where many buildings, like the Empire State Building, for example, they had a mooring mast on top of the Empire State Building, so blimps could dock, and passengers could get on and off. And so this was, everybody thought, was the wave of the future. Well, here's the problem with these things: they were filled with hydrogen, and hydrogen is incredibly flammable. And if you get so much as a little tiny spark near these things, they will go up like a Roman candle on the 4th of July. And so, anyway, in this particular story, there was a German Zeppelin, that's what they called their blimps, that was coming over from Europe and was going to dock in New Jersey. And they had a radio crew on the scene to record it. And normally this might be the most boring broadcast of all time. And then this is what happened.
To rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from. It burst into flames. Get it started. It's fighting, and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh my! Get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 20. Oh, 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I don't do it. I can't even talk to people and friends are out there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just laying down massive smoking wreckage.
Okay. Now, when you heard that on the radio, that was one of those holy crap, I got to listen every day because something crazy might happen moments. By the way, not everybody died in that crash. Believe it or not, there were people that survived that, which is insane. Um, Okay, so that happened in the early 30s, and I played you that to set the stage for this story. So in uh, in 1938, the world was on the brink of war. It was pretty obvious to everybody that the Nazis were up to no good. They had taken over power in Germany, and World War II hadn't started yet. But by this time, the Germans had already annexed Austria and the Sudetenland and the Rhineland, and they were on the march. And it was pretty apparent to everybody at some point there was going to be the outbreak of war. And at that time in the United States, one of the really popular shows on the radio was a show called the Mercury Theater uh, Presents. And it was hosted by Orson Welles. That's this guy right here. Now, Orson Welles was already famous. He played The Shadow. He played Lamont Cranston on that radio show, The Shadow. And he ended up getting his own show on CBS that was on Sunday nights. It ran an hour long, and they would do Shakespearean plays and other major theatrical things on the radio. And so it was October, and Orson Welles thought that it would be cool if he did a radio play of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, which was a book that was written in the late 1800s about Martian invasion, Martian invaders attacking the world, the United States. So we're going to listen to this. I'm going to link you to the broadcast, but I need to set the stage for you. First of all, Wells, he knew that on the night his show aired, there was another really popular show that was coming out of L.A. that was a comedy show, and that show ended about 5 minutes or so into Wells' broadcast. So he knew a lot of his listeners came over after his show had already started. So you got to keep that in mind. Um, the other thing is that when Wells wrote this up for the radio, he tried to make it as real as he possibly could. So he changed the places in the book to real places in New York and New Jersey, and um, all the characters he tried to make as believable as possible. So it wasn't that he you're going to hear a professor actually played by Wells himself, and he's from Princeton, which is a real university in New Jersey, and it's an Ivy League school that everybody respects. He at different points he has like generals speaking, and at one point he wanted to have during this thing um, someone playing President Roosevelt uh, talk, and but CBS said no, that's too real. So Wells had a character that he said was, I think he was the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of State, something. And darn it, if he doesn't sound exactly like President Roosevelt, who everybody knew his voice, but because at that time he was doing his fireside chats, his weekly radio shows to the nation. Um, so anyway, he used real places, realistic people, a guy that sounded like the president. Long story short, by the time this thing was over, people freaked out. Now, I'm not saying everybody went running for the hills, but enough did where this headline was pretty much the headline in every major newspaper. And people called the police station and jammed the lines trying to see what was going on. And at that time, when you called someone on the phone, you called a central switchboard operator, and they would have to patch you through. And if too many calls came in at once, it would shut the system down. It would jam the system up. And so people tried to call the police and couldn't get through to them. And most people that listened to this, they came in later into the broadcast and they didn't hear that this was fake or that this was a play. Um, and then, the number of people that got called up during the middle of it and said, Mabel, you got to turn it over to CBS. You're not going to believe what's going on, and freaked out. So it caused a mass panic. And I know that seems crazy. Like, why would anybody believe that? We'll get into that. I'm going to have another discussion for Wednesday where we're going to try and talk about why this happened. I would argue that given today's events and what's going on in the world and social media and here's two things. People are inherently stupid. I don't mean just like you're stupid. I mean, you are, but so am I. We all are. but we're dumb, and we get we get kind of caught up in groupthink and panic. And the other thing is we're incredibly lazy, stupid and lazy. And so how many times do we go after we read something on social media or online and actually check the source or get another opinion or fact check before we pass it on as news? So we'll get into that discussion on Wednesday, but I want you to listen to it, and then I'm going to have a worksheet that kind of asks. You're not going to have to listen to the whole thing. It's like an hour long. I'm going to have different parts that I want you to listen to, but give it a listen and answer the worksheet, and then we'll come back and discuss this together. It's a really cool event. This is the most famous broadcast in the history of radio, and it really cemented radio. It did two things. One, it kind of cemented radio as like the go-to source for information and entertainment, and it also taught us not to trust everything we hear on the radio, um, because people were fooled by this. So we'll come back to this discussion on Wednesday, but hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.